The one thing that I have actually found when it comes to my personal life, of personal experiences, when it when it's an investigation of belief of faith, the investigation of faith, and the understanding that there are many different beliefs on a global scale. I'd like to say that all the beliefs of faith that I have come in contact with and read when it comes to the belief of certain things, all of them, when it talks about various temples and various other places, when I look at it in light of um, social science and social realities, there are beliefs that are around the world that talk about the deities of their gods, and they talk about the realms of their existence, and they talk about their wives, and they talk about all of their offspring and all of their children. And you can read about these stories of the old and ancient. A lot of them look like to be Pictic historical global events where society and civilization was just being born, and the leaving of the wilderness and the leaving of the natural order of life, where things were created and built. And if you consider the mind of the existence of the very first development of creating something for yourself, let's put you in the mindset of a half developed animal, an animal that used to live in the wilderness and live in the wild, and would be known as a creature. And during the process of mind evolution, it could quite easily be seen that if an animal had developed a process of thinking and a process of um, building something from something that they had created for themselves, understanding that by sticking various wooden sticks in the ground would build a connection to a wall of a house, or even a shelter or a shade, and many sticks makes many areas of many places. And then you would build the knowledge of the recollection that if you could put these things in the ground as a circle, right, then you would build a tube of a place of a house for you to live in. It doesn't take long to build a roof of a house to be able to understand that that was the place in where they were going to dwell and sleep in. And all it takes is the development of a creature thinking to itself, I have now developed and became cognitive in my knowledge. And when I turn and look around at the rest of creation and the rest of the wilderness, I see myself as something higher than them. And then a creature of an animal that has evolved through the stages to look very similar as a man. Then it's not very far from there to consider yourself to be so changed as a wilderness animal of a creature to have considered yourself to be as fine as a deity or as fine as a god. All these things man has fallen in. Man has fallen in all these things. Left and came out of the wilderness, thought himself to be great and big. Changed his form and his frame from a creature and developed himself into something. Aye. Knowledge I am, says man. Knowledge I be, says he. Knowledge, and I build a temple of a house for me. I have wielded many things in life, and I have wielded my environment, sculpted and changed it, and have even written on tablets of clay with my writing tool of impressioning. I have created language and speak. I have created symbols. I scribe to be. I document my time, I document my being, I document my family and my offspring and children. I document the people I see, I document the things that I've said. I have spoken words instead. My tablet of information I bake in fire and save for my posterity. I, wilderness creature of a man, me, I be thee. And he puts it down. If you look at the history and the value of it, and you look at every single thing relating to it, there was a deity of a god. I have built an idol to myself, says this one. This idol of me, can you see the idol that I have fashioned for thee? I am the God for you, and this is my image for you. All these things you can find in history. Every single writing of an old and ancient place, of an old and ancient village, not civilization, all still very much in the wilderness, all still very much in the earth's world, all still very much not civilized at all. So, man evolves in his mind of who he thinks he is. Idols to himself and God to others. There, you see, is the thinking of a growing being. All of it you find in archaeology. You find the ruins, you find the carvings, you find all the representations of the first stages of evolutionary growth into civilization. Many, many mistakes were made. Huge leaps of misunderstanding was created. And over time, when these gods of lords that ruled landmass and area had offspring after offspring after offspring after offspring, would have left a legacy of a temple where a god dwelt, and a temple where the very first development of divinity existed. And over eons of time, and the remembrance of this temple, which used to be just a normal natural home of a simple creature, of a simple thing, had a wife and a home and children and offspring. Very similar to a well-known Babylonian so-called myth, Gilgamesh and Gilgamesh. A myth that reveals two sides of humanity. One, divine deity and man. Another one, devil, demon and evil thing. A devil and a demon and an evil thing. Or a deity of divine and man. Troublesome, I say. A wonder to the mind, and whether at all you should ever contemplate it. Now, all of it is historical and classed in this age as myth. The mythology of the creation and the mythology of society. The mythology of things that may or may not be myth. Now, if you check out the archaeology, where a man of a man, a deity, right? Now this is a quandary, this one. A man of a man that may have considered himself a deity of a god, right? Kills a beast that looks like himself. Kills a creature on four legs but has the face and the head of himself. Now, is it a representation of this man considering himself to be divine, deity, God, into I can do and kill and eat anything? Quandary is Gilgamesh and Gilgamesh. It's a strange story, because it's not the devil and the demon. It's not the evil, right? What you see is the devil and the demon of Gilga, right? Or Mesh. The devil or the demon side of the story is going ballistic in his head, is going wild in confusion. Why are you eating yourself? Why are you classing yourself as a god? Why are you classing yourself as something? Now, I know I'm out the bounds of the story, and I know I'm out the bounds of the scrolls of the writings, but I'm taking pieces of bits of information from it, knowing the archaeological remains of the records of the Pictic people. These are Pictic people of Pictic lives, early Stone Age, early man. There is an earlier story which you can find in the archaeological record which goes back even further than that. The early development of man's existence of wandering from the wilderness for being a beast or a creature, losing his horns and losing his crown and losing all the things that made him natural as a natural animal. And if you read all these old and ancient stories of the possibilities of evolution, or the possibilities of the writings explaining the possibilities of evolution, was it real? Was it stories passed down through family? Was it stories passed down through the evolutionary groups? Was it stories of this is what we were and this is how we are now? This is a tale where man considered himself a god, and where he lived in a home and a house which was later on known as the temple where a god lived. Later, the offspring of the offspring of the offspring of the offspring believed in faith and gods and goddesses, and believed in all sorts of things. Believed in the wilderness of the wild as being creatures of worship as well. Idols to themselves and writings explaining their lives. When you look at the evidence of all the archaeology in all the countries of all the people that have faith in religion, the only thing that ever came out of it was that the first process of cognitive thinking of development from animal to human meant that at some point they considered themselves gods and goddesses. And during the offspring of the offspring of the offspring of the offspring of many millions of generations, they believed in gods, and they had a belief of goddesses, and they had a belief in faith, and they believed that society was built around the knowledge of all of this. And they believed that if they built a temple of a temple, that their god that was before would come back and dwell in the temple of its past. When you read the writings of the old and ancient scroll and scripture writers, you have to look at it in the reality of how it's written. Idols to themselves, men seen as gods, and written possibly by the very man God himself, to be known as divine and deity and God of the earth and God of the rivers and God of the mountains and God of the hills, God of the afterlife and God of all these things. The very first cognitive thought process of thinking, when it came to the structure of the knowledge of the understanding of man, be back in a minute. The first dawn of light came, and the first dawn of thinking and understanding. These are the ways in which man thought himself to be. Not only did he think himself to be this, he possibly even believed in this, that he was all these things. And this is possibly now where these other things come from. Don't make an idol of worship to yourself. Don't build a temple to your existence. When you see what they call their myth in the world of Pictic life, what you see is history of realities of man's mind and his thought processes of developing society. When the society from all of this, goddesses and gods and families and lords and land managers and all the rest of everything else, you understand that there is all these other things written in as well. So, are we living in this generational world a Gilgamel and a Gilgamesh? You see, benevolent people of benevolency, of great knowledge and great technology, moon landings and rockets, war machines and tanks. When you read it, the Gilgamel and Gilgamesh, and you understand the mysteries of it, Benevolent man of good knowledge, right, seeing himself as benevolency and godlike and idols to myself, individual. When I look at the world today, and I look at the situation of everything that's in the world today, that's what I see. I see leaders of nations thinking themselves divine, and leaders of nations thinking themselves to be godlike, even if they may not think of it as being that way. The patterns of behavior in society that was birthed at the beginning of the civilization still remains. Man kills man and eats man. Man makes idols of worship for himself, to believe in himself. Governors of governors and military leaders of military value, managed by an order on earth. Is it the Babylonian order? Is it the old order of Babylon? Because that's what I'm seeing. That's what I witness when it comes to the world of the world today. My country is wrecked with all sorts of things. And I'm trying to save my people and save my population from something which I would definitely represent as the old and ancient Babylonian world of the Pictic individuals, of Pictic people. Now, I need to understand is that I, as a Celt, I am a Pictic man. I have a Pictic origin and an island of Pictic people and an isolated place. And I am trying to free them from something that has been written through the whole of society. And we have simulated all of this from the very birth of it all the way through to the complexity of it. And even the benevolency of a deity, right? As a man thinking himself to be so good and so great. I see that even now in society. People believing that they are superhuman in some way. So this is what I have gleaned from archaeology. The archaeological record of the archaeological remains. Now, obviously, what we have as knowledge on our earth is to eradicate all the old gods and all the old goddesses, and to build a connection to the value of reality of truth, and to build a connection to the reality of living. That we need stabilized stability in our society, stabilized society. So, if you read and look at the historical value of the old records, this is every single thing that you see developing and growing and changing and becoming, and then we get our society. This society, our modern society of where we are now. And there has been an assimilation from the old first inclusions of the development of thinking all the way through to where we are now today. When you look at the early days when we were animals living in the forest, we were like Adam and Eve. When you look at the later days, we were like the cast out. And then we were like the ones that moved through the realms of building civilization and thought ourselves some to be gods, some to be goddesses and managers and rulers of land and regions and families and lords and You just need to read all the scriptures, the scrolls, and all of the old Pictic writings to know how it all went, to see how the development of the old world was, and to understand how the old world became something violent and turmoil. When you think of evolution and you think of the stages of the growth of evolution, and you think about the many different changes, we have had hundreds. If you go back to the stages of evolution, though, where we change from one animal of a creature into another animal of a creature, into another animal of a creature, into another animal of a creature, right? Then there are other things that you can examine which will build a connection to who you are as a person, right? There is genome genetics, and genome genetics can prove that you could be a pure evolutionary development of pure growth, where you have evolved through all natural stages of evolution all the way through to man. There is another side, though, which is also depicted in the old and ancient texts and the old and ancient religions. A lot of this stuff is classed as being something where the possibility of the advent of too soon a genetic connection was made, where a species of a species was too close to another species but still intermated. Some of it could be classed as seen as two wild animals of two wild creatures of two different species coming together, right? And the struggle of the genome of their children and the different sizes of bone structures and the different sizes of the muscle contours and the different sizes of all the things that would cause a body to be racked with all kinds of twists and pains and all sorts of malformed lives because of the genetical genome not being correct or right. There's a well-known village that was found where there was modern man and Neanderthal that dwelt together as two species of hominid. Still wilderness creatures, still almost man, nearly, but modern man and Neanderthal. And they had children and offspring and deformity. These structures of natural existence found in creation itself is an understanding where your genome chain will tell you where you are. Whether you're a pure evolutionary stage of growth, of pure stages of living all the way through to man, or whether there has been early interaction between the individual species of man. And of course, this would answer all sorts of questions when it comes to the frame and form of all of us now today, of what we would expect to possibly encounter through our own interactions of our own partners and our own children and children's children, and the possibilities of the illnesses or possible reoccurrences of certain deformities possible. So all of these ways of working and ways of thinking, you do know that historical value of historical records, even as far back, same thing when it comes to prehistory and you know, Neolithic, and even further back to like Jurassic, or even further back, all of this development was still the same thing. You can find in the Jurassic and even in earlier stages of early life, sea life, that there has always been this in creation, where there is a pure genome evolutionary stage and there is a mixing genome of two different genomes that has created malformities and deformities. It happened in Jurassic, it happened in all areas of all stages of development and growth. It happens in cellular life of cellular growth, where you can have a pure cellular growth of cellular life, and then there's another cell of another cell that's had a pure cellular life of cellular growth, different genome chain though, coming together with other cells and building a structure of something because they are close enough in the genetical genome to do so, but it created an issue of a problem in the cell. And the cell becomes no longer a pure evolutionary cell. It becomes a cell of a possibility of a change for sure, but it also creates trouble and creates sorrow and pain and suffering. So when you see the history of the earth and you look at the knowledge that is saturated in the archaeological records of so early times to all the way through the different stages of ages on our earth, all the way through, right through to where we are, early man's development, Pictic development, all the way through to civilization development, of early development civilization, we have always had this particular problem in our society. Now, how do you see and understand when it comes to contemplation and how to perceive this? Do you think of it as all unnatural and all accepted and all perfectly fine and normal? Or do you consider it as being something where there might be a required intervention over something, an intervention? Needless to say, though, there is this in our favour. If all of this global situation that we're in at the minute doesn't change, there is this. If we get the red giant, then we are extinct in the form that we're in. If we move with the slow growth of atmospheric changes, then we will evolve into something new. We might still hold the same frame, we may still hold the same form, but we may be more animalistic in our evolutionary development because of having to make the necessary changes back from civilization and back into the wilderness. If the civilization that we have, which we have developed from the early stages of early growth, and we have built many things over the periods of time, and we have invented and created and done all sorts of man-made wonderful things, right? When the expansion is there, and if it's too soon, right, then there will be an extinction rate of something. If it's a slow rate, then we will be evolving. If we cannot maintain what we've got because of our frame changing, right, we may not have the dexterity of our hands. We may go back to more of a survival of an earth, of life surviving on earth, and we might evolve back and away from our technology. If we evolve away and back from our technology into something else, right, into another creature of a thing, and we can't operate this stuff anymore, nature will always take hold and bring us back into the survival fold. So, because there is so much information of the possibilities of what may or may not happen, or may not be, right? Then we are really in the stages of the story of the Gilgamel and the Gilgamesh, don't you see?